Dear learners, welcome again. So, in the last lecture, we have discussed about four of the value type that an object can take. That is, one is numeric. Then we have discussed about integer. Then we have discussed about character, and finally, we have discussed about logical. And we have left over two of the value type, complex and raw, because that is not relevant to this course. Also, I have asked you to create two objects in R. One is by your name and another is by your pin area. Okay, let us now first see how we can create those object name, and then we will go ahead. Let us say I am creating an object with the name, my name, and then I just assign my value. Okay, now create another object with the object name, my pin, and I assign the value 110016. And if I run this, so this object name is created, and then if I run this, so this object with the my pin name will be created. Let us now see what is the value of my pin. So the value of my pin is 110016. So this is the solution of the practice assignment I gave you in the last lecture. So in this lecture, I'll be discussing about the data structures in R. So these are very helpful during the analysis. So until now, what we have discussed is this is an object 1, then this is another object. Okay, and we have assigned a one value to this object. So this is one object, then this is second object, and we have assigned this value. Okay, what about if we have to assign many values to this object? Okay, if we have to add one more value here, one more value here. Say for example, this is a name object and this is a pin object. Okay, now in this we want to have another name like Mukesh, then we have Priyanka, and we want to give some another pin. So how we can do this kind of assignment to this particular object? So these are possible with the help of data structure. So this one particular kind of this is a one kind of data structure, and then this is a another kind of data structure. Okay, and what exactly this data structure is, we'll discuss now. In R, there are six kind of data structure are there. So first is vector, second is data frame, third is list, fourth is matrices, fifth is factor, and sixth is array. Okay, and the two of the data structure what we will be using very regularly is vector and data frame. So first we will be discussing about the vector and data frame, and then we'll go ahead to another data structures. Okay, so let us first discuss what vector is. Okay, so vector is the most simplest form of data structure in R. Okay, so if we see here in this particular two object type, so this is vector and this is also a vector. Okay, so in simpler terms you can say that vector is just like a column. Okay, so we can say that this is a column that store pin. Okay, so this is another column which store the name. Okay, now if we have to add the more values into this column, okay, most of you have created the column in different spreadsheet. How you do it? So you open the file and then you simply add the value 12, 13, 14, 15, or the name Mohit, Mukesh, Priyanka, Raman. Okay, but in R we do this by using the function C. Okay, so what C is? So C means concatenation. So we have to add more values to this particular object. So what exactly we are doing here is we are directing R that you create a object which is a type of a vector and assign this 5 6 value whatever we will be giving. Okay, so we'll see just example in R how we can do that. Okay, so this is a function which we will be using for creating a vector. So say for example, I am creating a object with the name pubdoc, and it can have three values. So how we have to do? So first we have to name the object. So this is a pubdoc is a name. Then we have to use this C function, and then we have to give the value. Okay. So it's 12, 14, 15, and if I run this is created. Okay. And if I have to check the value, what we have to do? We just put this, and if I run this, so these three values are assigned, and this is a kind of vector. What we have done here is we have created a vector pubdoc which can have three values: 12, 14, 15. Okay. So this is very first thing we have done. So this is how our first vector is created. Now now we will create another vector with names. So how we will do that? So now we are creating a vector with names. So I am naming this vector as researcher, and the same function I am using C, and I am mentioning the three names. The only thing, if you remember, I have discussed in the last lecture that whenever you have to define any character value, any text value, it should be in the inverted comma. So the same way I am doing here, I am keeping all the characters in the inverted commas and then putting the commas between them. And if I run this, and if I have to check the value, it's showing this particular value. The values are Raman, Mohit, Lokesh. So I have created another vector, and we'll back to the so, so this is another vector we have created, researcher. Then this is Raman, Mohit, Lokesh. Okay. So until now, what we have done here is we have created two objects. One is pubdoc and another is a researcher. Now, if you check the class of this particular object, and if you run this, it's a character. So this researcher is a character, and if I check the class of our pubdoc, it's numeric. Okay. So we have discussed in the last lecture that if we don't explicitly mention that it's an integer, it won't take, it will be taking as numeric only. So this is how you can create the vector in R. Okay. It's very simple. Now you have to remember few things whenever you are creating the vector. So the first thing is that a vector can have the value of same type only. Okay. If you give the numbers and then you will give the some text in it, so what will happen? Let us see now in R itself. If I do like this, say for example, I am creating another vector, my vector 1, which have two numeric values and one character values. If I do like this, and if I check the class of this, first let us see the value, what value it has been assigned. Okay. So if you see the values here, these 1920s are not numeric. These are in character. Okay. What happened here is, so in this my vector 1, what we have created, this 19, 20, and this AB. So this 19 and 20, these are not numeric. Okay. So these are what exactly are things that, so are things that it's a text only. You have to remember that whenever you are creating a vector, it should be of the same type. Now let's say example, if we check the class of this vector, okay, so it's character, it's not numeric. Okay. Now if I create another vector with only character, And if I run this, so the class of my vector 1 and my vector 2 is character. Okay, so this 19 and 20 is not numeric. You can't do any operation. Let us see through R only that why we can't do the operation on this 19, 20. Okay, so say for example, if I multiply my vector 1 with 2. Okay, so so if we see through our pen paper example, if this is a vector and this is a number, if we multiply this by 2, okay, so it will be like this. So the answer should be 38 and 40. It should become here like that. So but what should be the answer here? We'll see in R. So it's showing the error that it's a non-numeric argument. Okay. So this is, you have to be very clear that whenever you are creating a vector, it should be of the same type. Okay. If it is a character, it will be a character. If it's a numeric, it should be a numeric. If it's an integer, it should be an integer. Okay. Whenever you will be doing multiple large scale analysis, and these value type becomes very critical. Okay. So you have to be very careful whenever you are creating the vector, that it should be of same type. So these are some of the example of valid vector. So these are of the same type, and this is also a same kind of vector. Its characters, and this is numeric. What could be the possible invalid vector type is? Okay. So if I do like this, it's a invalid vector type. It will create, the vector will create that. If you direct R that you create a vector with these three value, it will create, but it won't be of the type which you want. Okay, if you are doing this way, you meant that 19, 20 are numeric and AB is character. Okay, so that you can't do in vector. Okay, it will take 19, 20 as a character only. This you can identify from the output itself. Okay, if you see the output of this, of my vector 1 is, this is in inverted commas. Okay, that means 19, 20 is not numeric, it's a character. But if you see here, if I run this here again, if I run this, okay, and now if I run this my vector 1, this 19, 20, there is no inverted commas. Okay, so you have to remember this whenever you are doing the analysis. Okay, how the output is of that particular vector is. Now so now I request you all that you practice to create this particular vector in your R studio, and let me know what exactly the response you get. Okay, let us now see what exactly these different kinds of vectors are. Okay, so one is numeric. The, as the name says, that a numeric vector is a vector which take all the numeric value. Then we have integer vector, which can have only the integer value. Then we have character vector, okay, which have the character value. So the whatever that value type we have discussed in the last lecture, we can create the vector of each value type in R. So let's say for example, I am creating a numeric vector. So it's a numeric. If I run this, it's 1 2. If you want to use this 1 2 as integer, you have to use L. We have discussed in the last lecture. So this is a integer vector. If I run this, 1 2 is there. If I have to create a character vector, we can do like this. and this is how our another vector is created. And if I see the response of this, so my character vector, it has two values, Mohit and Mukesh. And if I check the value of int vector, and this. So if you see here, this 1 2 and this 1 2 are different, because this 1 2 is integer and this 1 2 is numeric. Okay, so this you have to remember whenever you are creating the vector, that what value type you are using in it. Okay, now let us do some basic operations on these vectors. So I am creating a vector here, my vector 19 20 21, and if I run this, my vector is created, and this is another vector. Okay, so how the multiplication is done? Okay, so the way we do the arithmetic operations on the columns, so we can similarly we can do the same kind of operations on this vector also. Before doing these operations in R, let us first see how we used to do these column operations. Okay, so what we have done, we have created one vector here, vector 1, and we have created here vector 2. Okay, 19 20 21 2 3 4. Okay, so this is our vector 1 and this is our another vector. If I have to do addition, how we will do? It's cell wise. So 21 4 25, 20 plus 3 23, 19 plus 2 21. So this is addition. If I have to do multiplication, we have to do 21 4 ja 84, 23 ja 60, 19 2 ja 38. So this is multiplication cell wise. Then if I have to do subtraction, we will do 21 minus 4 17, 20 minus 3 17, 19 minus 2 17. So this is subtraction. And division, 21 divided by 4, 20 divided by 3, 19 divided by 2. So this will come in decimal. So this is division. The same way we can do the all these operations in R itself. So we'll see how we will do in R. So addition is very simple. It's you have to use this plus symbol we have discussed in the last lecture, and it's if I'll just click here and I'll run here. So answer is correct. So what we can do here is that we can create a new vector which store the additions of these two vector. Okay. So here we have created another vector, add vector, and we have transferred the addition of these two vectors into this particular vector. So if I run this and if I see the value of this add vector, so this is the same answer. Now if I have to do the subtraction, the same way I can do the subtraction and multiplication. So for multiplication we have to use star. I'll do this. And for division, if I do this, now if I see the output of these three vectors, so subtraction, all three values are 17. Now multiplication, 38 60 84, and then division, if we see, so it's in decimal. Okay, so this is how you can do the basic operations on vectors, and this we have to use during our analysis. Okay, so during the analysis many times we have to access the particular values of a vector. So to access that particular values of that vector, we must know that where that value is located. Okay, so in R, the indexing system of a vector is starts from 1. So this particular value 19 is at location 1, then this 20 is second location, and this is at the third location. Okay, if we see here, So our vector was like, and this was our vector, and I have to access the first value. Okay, so it will be at first. Okay, if I have to access the third value, it will be on the third location. Okay, so this is the third value. So this is how you can access the particular value of that vector. Okay, when you have the access of that particular value, then you can do the any operations also. Okay, so you can do the operations of this particular row also. Say for example, you don't want to do the whole addition or the subtraction for whole of the vector. Okay, but you want to do addition of this particular row. So how you will do that? So you will say that from this vector take the second value, and from that this vector take the second value and multiply or add or subtract. Okay, instead of doing for whole vector, you can do this for only one particular cell also. Okay, so let us now take this interesting example that you are creating a two vectors, and these two vectors are character vector. Okay, so I am taking these an example. So you are creating these two vectors and they both are character. So I am running it. Now if you do the arithmetic operations on these vector, what will be the output? Okay, so you do the practice and let us know what is the response you get when you are running this particular command. Okay, so if you run this, what response you get, you let us know through the discussion forum. So this is all about a vector. Now we will discuss about data frame. So what data frame is? Data frame in R is nothing, is a data set. Okay, so this is one particular vector is there, and this is one vector is there. So data frame is this whole comprises of all the vectors is a data frame. And whenever we will be doing the analysis, we will be handling this particular data structure type during the course. Okay, so a data frame is comprises of vectors which are of different value type. Okay, we will see each one by one. Let us now see how we can create a data frame in R. So the simplest way to create a data frame in R is first you create this one vector, and then you create this vector, and then you combine these two vector. Okay, then you combine it. Okay, so the step one is you create individual vectors and then you combine it as a data frame. Your data frame will be created. Okay, so we'll see how we can create data frame in R. So we have already created this vector, but I will run it again. So this is a vector. Now this is another vector. To create a vector, we have used the function C, but to create a data frame, we have to use the another function which is data dot frame. So how we will do that? So we have to use this data dot frame function. So in data dot frame, and here we have to use this researcher. Okay, so if I run this, data frame is created, and I want to supply this to a another object which I named it as res pub. Okay, if I do like this, so now our object have this. Okay, so we have created this particular data frame and we have named it as res pub. So this is how we can create a data frame in R. So for this is a name of the object. So these are the vector name, or you can say it as a column name. So this is a vector researcher which has three values: Raman, Mohit, Lokesh, and this is another vector which has three values: 12, 14, 15. Okay. Now say for example you have a data frame and you want to add some values to it. Okay. So the one way is that you add values here like 16, 17, and then you add name here as Sumit, and then Arvind. Okay, so you create one vector here as pubdoc and then another vector as researcher. Then you combine these two vectors and converted it to as a data frame. Okay, so how we will do in R? So I have to add one more name here. So I'll just add here one more name, and if I run this here, this is done. And now we will combine this as a data frame. So this kind of error you also face, and this is a error of naming convention of what the name you have given to the object. Okay, so my object is researcher, but I am using here as research. R is missing. Okay, if I do like this, it's okay. Now our one more values is added to this particular data frame. So you don't have to worry much about these errors. Okay, during the analysis, whenever you are using R, you will be face many of the errors. Okay, and but those errors are straightforward. So if you see here also, the error of there is something is missing. Okay, so if you see here, error is that this one particular object is there. Okay, this is also one object is there, but my object is this one which has the four values. It's saying that there are different number of rows are there. So you have to be very careful whenever you are creating a data frame by using this approach. So this is a lengthy approach, and many times error comes because of wrong naming convention of the object. Okay, if you see here, my data frame is created with one more values. Okay, and my earlier data frame was this with only three names. Now we have the one more name. So this is a lengthy way. Okay, and this is like for this there is only one values are there. If we have to add 10 or 20 values to this particular data frame, it will take huge time. Okay, what exactly the function you have to use? So the function name is fix. So what we are doing here is we are fixing this particular data frame. So if we run this, and this one data editor interface will come. Now we can add more values to here, like Priyanka, then Ramesh, Meet, Manju, then Neha, and we can add like 4, 5, 8, 12, 13. Okay, so if I close this, and our new data set is, so these many values can be added by using this function. Okay, so that is the beauty of this R, is that it has many inbuilt functions that makes your task much easier during the analysis. And I'll be sharing the names of all these functions that will make your task easier during the analysis. So now say for example you want to add one more column to this data set. So this particular data set has the name of the researcher, then the number of publications. Now you want to add one more column that store the number of citations. How you will do that? The same way, the lengthy approach is that I'll create another vector like citation. Then I enter the values here like 2, 3, 4, 5. And this time what I'll do here is that in one way I combine this vector and this data frame, or I can combine all these three single vector and then I combine it as a data frame. Okay, so this is a lengthy way to add one more vector to this particular data frame. So say for example I am adding here more values. So this is another vector. If I run this, So what I am doing here is that I am attaching the column side doc to the data frame. So if I run this here, our another column is attached to this particular data frame. Okay, but this is a lengthy way to do to attach the one more column to a data frame. Another way, you can use this function fix, and if you do fixing here, it will open here, and now you can name this as site book. It's a numeric. Then you add the values here, 1 2. If I close this, now this is the easiest way we can add the column to our data frame. If you want to go by this particular approach, what will happen is that sometimes, like say for example, if you add here as these values, okay, if I run this now, so it will say that there are like 8 rows are there in that particular column. Okay, so sometimes if you have a large data set and if you don't have the knowledge about your data set, that how many row it has, so it will show the errors. Okay, so the better way is to use this fix function, and if you run this, if you don't add this particular value, okay, if you remove this 8 here, and it will automatically put NA. Okay, and now if I like close this, so it will show the NA values. Okay, so this is a better approach to attach a column to the data set. Now our data set is ready. So this is our data set. So now this is our data set. So in data set, the very first thing is that we want to know what exactly the dimension of that data set. Okay, so for that we have to use this function dim. If I do this dim, so it's 10 3. So what 10 and 3 means? 10 means there are like 10 are the number of row and 3 are the columns. For small data set, we can simply run the data set and we can see here, and it is showing. But say for example, you have 10,000 values, so all those values will be shown here and some will be omitted, so you won't able to see the exact values. The better way is using dim function. So if you do this, you will get this output, and this 10 and 3 is 10 is number of rows and 3 is columns. Okay, but you want to know only the number of row, how many rows are there. Okay, so for that the function is n row, and if you run this is 10. Here I request you to pause the video and just try to think what would be the possible command to know the number of columns in a data set. Okay, so to know number of row, we have n row. To know number of columns, we will have n col. Okay, so if you have thought of n col, you are correct. And if I do like this, n col, number of columns are 3. Now, sometimes we want to know what exactly that structure of our data set is. So, to do that, we will use str function. It will give us the more detail about this particular data set. Okay, so dimension and n rows and n column function give us the just basic values, that these are the number of rows are there, these are the number of columns, but we want more details. Okay, how that particular data is. So it is showing that there are 10 observation of 3 variables, and these 3 variables are one is character and other 2 are numeric, and these are the values. Okay, so this is how you can know about your data set, and then you can decide what analysis you will be going on this particular data set. Okay, so say for example, you are calculating the average and you put the average on this particular variable. Okay, so it's a character variable, how average will be calculated. So this is very important to know what exactly the structure of your data set. Then we have another function which summarize the data set, that what exactly the minimum value in that particular data set, what is maximum value. So for that we have this summary function, and it summarize the data set. So this is how it summarize the data set, that this particular data set has 3 columns. One is researcher, another is pubdoc, and third is sitedoc, Then the length of researcher is 10 and its class is character. Then pubdoc, for pubdoc the minimum values are 4, and there is na is also there and maximum is 16. Then similarly for sitedoc the minimum value is 2 and the maximum value is 12. So say for example you have a data set that have a publication details of that particular institution. So if I take this as a that data set, so we can say that the number of documents are published by these author are 4. Okay, and there is one na values are there, of course there. So we are not sure that this author has either published or not. So we can say that so at present we don't have the data of this particular author, that how many documents that particular author has published. The similar way we can say that the minimum number of citations of those documents, and then the maximum citations. Okay, another question for you, that if you notice here that these values are 4, 8, 12, 11, 14, 16 are coming, but these values are in decimals. Okay, 2.0, 3.75, 5.50. Why is it so? Okay, please let us know in the discussion forum. The next thing is to know more about the data set. So how you can do that? Using this head function. So head gives you the top few values of your data set. Okay, so if you run this, it gives the 6 top values. Okay, so these are the 6 top values of this particular data set. And then if you want to see the last 6 values, so you can do like this. You can use the tail function. So it will show the 6 values from the bottom: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Now if you don't want to see the top 6 or the last 6 value, you want to see only 2 or 3 values, so you can also do that. Okay, so how you will do that? For that you have to mention that how many rows you want. So you can just give the value here. If you run this, so these are the 3 values of this particular data set. And if you want to see the last 2 values, you can do like this. Okay, so these two functions are basically used to know about the few values of the data set, but you can use either of the function for both the things also. Okay, so this is how you can check the top few values of your data set using these head on tail function. So now we have this our as a data set, and we want to see the what exactly the column name of that particular data set is. So we can use this col name function and we can run it like this. It will give the output that these are the 3 column names of this particular data set. Now if you want to change the column name of this particular data set, okay, so for that what we have to do is, so we have to use this particular function col names, and we have to assign the 3 col names. Okay, so I don't want researcher, pubdoc and sitedoc as a column name of this particular data set. I want to use sch, pub and site. So if I do this, but now if I run this, see our column names have been changed. Okay, another way that fix function we already have, so we can use that fix also. Like say for example, if I do this, if I run it here and I want to change as ch1, okay, and if I close it, and now if I run it again, okay, so this fix function is very helpful, and always use this whenever you want to change any call names or any value to the particular data set. So let us now do some of the basic data manipulation on data frame. So whenever we have a data set, we used to check that is there any missing values are there, or is there any NAs are there. So we can use the function is.na to know is there any NA values are there. So here if you see there are like four trues are there. So the presence of these four true are that these four values are NA, and other than that these all false are showing that there is no NA at this particular location. So we want to replace these NA values with some possible values so that we can go ahead for the analysis. So the easiest way we have already discussed many times that we can use fix function. So we can use this way and we can put here 0, and if I close this, now if I run it again, it will show only 3 true. That means that only NA are available at only 3 locations. So we want to replace these NA with some possible values. So this we can also do by fix also, but there is a special function in R which we can use to replace this value, that is replace function, and this replace function is very useful during our analysis. So I request you to give a try using this replace function also. So how you will do that? If you do like this, and now if I check it here again, is N, there is no false. That means now there is no NA values are there. If I see here, so here this 1 to 3 is not a numeric or not a integer. Okay, here is this 1 to 3 is a character. So this you have to remember during this replace function, is that how you are replacing it. Okay, what values you are replacing it. Okay. Now say for example you have a large data frame which have like 50 columns, okay, and you want to access one particular column of that data frame. So how you do that? So for that you have to use this dollar sign. As soon as you put this dollar sign after your data frame name, it will show the all possible kind of options. Okay, so these are the columns. If you click here and if you run here, it will show only the values of this particular column. It will not show the whole data frame. So this is how you can do, like if I go for another, like for public, so these are the details. Now say for example you want to do the addition of all these publications. Okay, so how you can do that? Okay, so these are the sum of these values. Okay, so this is how you can access that one particular column in a data frame. Now after this you want to access the particular value of a data frame. How you will do that? The same way, the way we do it for the vector kind of thing. So if we have to access the value, what we have to do, we have to name the data frame, then which column. So it's in col, say for example, and let us now take that we want to take the third value. So if we run this here, so it's the third value is locase, and similarly we can access the publication. Okay, so say for example you want to see that the number of publications of the third author and the number of publications of the fifth author are equal or greater or less than. How we will do that? So for that we will be using like this. So these are the number of publication of third author. So now we want to check that these number of document published by the third authors are greater than the number of documents published by the fifth author. So we will check. It's false. So that means number of documents published by the third author is greater than the number of publications are published by the fifth author. So I used here this less than symbol, but you can use the other symbol also, greater than. If you do like this, it will show true. Okay. So this is the true value. So this is how you can create a data frame, and these are some of the basics operations of data frame. And so this is all about the vector and the data frame. So in the next lecture, I'll discuss about the four of the other data structure what we use in R. And I just request you all to give a try to create your own vector and data frame in R. And if you face any of the issue, please let us know. Thank you. I'll see you in the next lecture.